thank you all for hosting us tonight. And also, in case you're unaware, they are also videotaping the meeting for us this evening so that we can host that on the Big Give SA website for those board members who were unable to attend and the many nonprofits who are signed up. Excuse me. I would like to let y'all know that currently to date, and correct me if I'm wrong, we are sitting at just over 255 nonprofits that are registered to date for the Big Give. So our goal initially back in the summer was 300 nonprofits. So we are well on our way, and we still have open registration until April 11th. So if you are a board member of an organization, you're obviously of an organization that's represented tonight. If you're sitting on a board that's not participating, please get the word out because we still have a lot of room for many nonprofits to participate. So I'm the executive director of the San Antonio Nonprofit Council. And to give you a little bit of history on how this all came about, I would like to give a huge shout out and thanks to Linda McDavitt, who's the executive director of the Genevieve and Ward Orsinger Foundation. And she's kind of out there being my checking people in, but she is the reason this is happening in San Antonio. She lives in Austin. She went through and experienced Austin's Giving Day last year, their first year of doing Amplify Austin. And after going through that as a individual donor and as a foundation, she was like, why aren't we doing it here? We need to do it in San Antonio. This is awesome. It's a way for the nonprofits to get exposure beyond their inner circle. It's a way for millennials to come on board and be exposed as individual philanthropists in areas that they are passionate about. And how can we do that? So she approached a few of us, including the Area Foundation, the 80/20 Foundation, the AFP San Antonio, and the Department of Cultural Affairs at the city and the council to sort of come together as partners and begin planning this. So this began back in July of last year, and the Nonprofit Council has taken the lead for the effort to drive the program. The Area Foundation is being the back office where all of the donations and funds will funnel through and go out to the nonprofits, and everyone else is sort of kind of helping us as we go along this first year. And John and I have a real quick presentation. We're going to take about 10 or 15 minutes, and then I'm going to turn it over to our guest speaker, Mr. Palmer Moe, to talk a little bit about board engagement and what you guys can do to help your nonprofits get through this incredible day. And this is year one, and we are going to learn from this, and we're going to grow. But three of the goals that we have for this particular Giving Day are really three words: to invest, to drive, and to leverage. We want to invest strategically in Bexar County nonprofits, and we want to drive our collective efforts forward. The community, we want to get the entire community involved. That's from corporations, individuals, foundations, the entire community, and we want to leverage that giving with some prize incentives throughout the day to help kind of incentivize the nonprofits to maybe have some fun while they're doing this all via social media. Those prize incentives we'll talk a little bit about later, but they are an effort to kind of give certain hours a little boost. We might have $1,000 to give away in a certain hour for a particular nonprofit that might bring in the most unique donors in that hour. We may have an opportunity to give some money away at the end of the day for a matching prize from a foundation, and we'll explain some of that in a little bit. To me, the funding day, the giving day, goes beyond fundraising. We have found this is our fourth kind of meeting workshop for the nonprofits that we have done in the past 2 weeks. This goes beyond the fact that this is a day, a 24-hour period where we're driving people to give online. We're also supporting the nonprofits who are participating in this effort through trainings and workshops that are free to the participants. So we've had 2 intro to social media workshops last week. We had a great workshop on Monday, yesterday, from someone who participated in the Amplify Austin Giving Day last year as a nonprofit. And she basically gave the folks in the room kind of a roadmap of what she and her agency did to participate in the Big Give. And I think they were playing with 5,000 as their goal for the day last year, and I think they ended up at the end of the day with 25,000 because they also got one of the prize awarded to them at the end of the day. So that's kind of cool. I mean, we are building the capacity of the participating organizations beyond just fundraising, but we're showing them some new and unique tools that they may not be using to reach out to a different donor base. We're helping them develop online skills, and then increasing public awareness of just the nonprofit sector. We plan on driving earned media. I have a very dear friend of mine who's in the room this evening, who I've known for way too long in our media days, Chancey Blackburn, who has graciously stepped up to say, I want to help you talk to the media. We need all of our media partners, be it electronic, outdoor, print, to get involved and get behind this. So we plan on advertising this pretty heavily throughout the last 2 weeks of April and into the Giving Day on May 6th with interviews, morning shows, the whole 9 yards. So we are getting behind this very strongly, but we're also teaching the nonprofits and encouraging them to go through their boards, through their kind of tribe and those people that are in their circle to get the word out beyond just our earned media and beyond the social media aspect. So I'm going to turn it over to John Burnham, who is a consultant that's working with the Nonprofit Council on this project, and to kind of give you some of the mechanics and history of the Giving Days.
Thanks, Scott. So I'm John Burnham. Scott brought me on in September to work on this event. We've been sort of planning together since then, so we can't believe that it's only 2 months out. That's the crazy part at this point. So when Linda brought us this, we thought it was a great idea. And this has been a successful model sort of throughout the country. There are a number of cities that have been doing it between 5 and 7 years. And what they've shown is that they grow rapidly over time. So the first year, there's some success. And then after that, it just picks up a lot. And so as you see on the board back behind me, these are some of the days that we sort of wanted to look at and compare ourselves to when we kind of got invested. And these aren't the only cities, but these are some of the ones that have had great success in their first year, or are relatively close to us geographically, have similar demographics, and so we thought we might, sort of compare ourselves to them and really see what we could accomplish in the years to come. The first one on the board is Minnesota Gives to the Max, and that's the entire state. So it's a huge state, obviously. $17 million in their fourth year is a large amount of money for about 1,000 agencies. That's both schools and nonprofits for that event. And who knows how much they could have raised. They actually had a problem with their carrier, who is not the carrier that we are using, that crashed for several hours during their give day. So they could have been even higher. But typically, they've been kind of going back and forth with North Texas for the largest give day. Amplify Austin, which is the reason Linda came to us and really pushed it here. She said Austin's goal was $1 million in their first year, and they exceeded that by leaps and bounds with $2.8 million. That was about $2.2 million in raised effort, and then about another 0.6 or 600,000 in prize incentives that were provided through their community foundations and local institutions. Omaha Gives, as you see, in their first year actually exceeded that at $3 million, and all of the money didn't come from Warren Buffett, so we're not sure how Omaha did it, but it makes them a great model to kind of look at. North Texas, that's the kind of gold standard that we want to look at and be 5 years out. North Texas started at about $4 million, and that's Dallas, Fort Worth, Abilene, all the areas north, all of the areas in and around that metroplex, and then just north of there. So much larger population than what we're dealing with, but still, like their level of growth has been astronomical. So this past year, they raised $25 million, and that's up from 15 the previous year. So these are huge exponential growths that we're seeing sort of across the board, and they did that for 1,200 agencies in 24 hours. So it's a lot of money in a short period of time. And then, of course, Give Big Seattle, who we really like to see ourselves compared to, given that we're similar size in a metro area, and they're in their third year and raised $11 million. And so they're one city that's doing this effort, and we really feel like that's something that we can shoot for, aim for, and achieve. And then Big Give Miami, you see in their second year, just did $3.3 million. And so our question is sort of, what are we going to do kind of this upcoming year in our first year? And there are ways that we are going to accomplish this goal to sort of meet and match what we've seen other cities do, or through community buy-in. That's first and foremost what drives these days. And that involves a lot of outreach through social media from these institutions and organizations. And then it also involves a lot of nonprofit support. So we have that already. You know, we're sitting at about 255 plus nonprofits. Austin was a little under 300 their first year. So we're really closing in on that and feel confident that, you know, we can definitely raise well with groups like KLRN representing us and carrying the banner, I'm sure. Strong social media presence, that's a key. And one of the reasons we've been training a lot of these organizations so far who don't have a web presence yet, we sent out a comprehensive survey at the very beginning in order to encourage them, to respond to us so we could sort of see where we were, get a lay of the land, and then we're going to do one post operation as well to sort of see what kind of growth we kind of see and prepare ourselves for next year. And then robust prize incentives. That is certainly not the end all be all. As you can see, Austin, I said, raised $2.2 million out of that 2.8. Another 600,000 came from prizes, though. And so these nonprofits, especially the small ones, benefit greatly by having an opportunity even to raise $1,000 to $3,000 in hourly prizes. You know, these are opportunities for exposure to groups that they've never had opportunities to be exposed to. And these are opportunities to really rally their base for the funding that is needed for what they're doing. And for some of these agencies that have budgets that are $8,000 to $10,000, which we have a number of that are involved in this, that's a huge amount of money and a really big jumpstart because these funds aren't restricted. So they can really use these to grow their organization in the best way they see fit.
And I think a good example, if I can point this out, is the Kronkowski Foundation. They came on board fairly early and put in $15,000 in prize money for the day. And what's unique about the prize structure is we can make it whatever the donor or the funder wants it to be. So they have an issue area and several issue areas and grantees that they support, and they wanted that money to kind of go to those grantees and have them have an opportunity to vie for that money. So they looked back, if you'd been funded with the Kronkowski Foundation the past 4 years, you're eligible to participate in that prize money. So that's kind of cool. I mean, you know, we can go any foundation that has issue areas. That I think Petco is one that is, you know, obviously the animal rescue and those kind of agencies. So we can target some of the prize money based on the issue areas of foundations, and then some of our business partners and corporate partners are giving the money just, you know, as hourly prizes to whomever can compete. So it's kind of fun to be able to do that and create these prize levels and put the money where the funder and the person donating it wants it to be.
And so where do these prizes come from? Scott sort of jumped that answer. Yeah, foundations, Kronkowski is one of them. Businesses are a big sponsor of these. Individual donors are also big. And then also individual nonprofits get prizes from people offering up business partners, board members, anything and anybody who has got close ties to their organization and wants to offer up a matching grant opportunity. And those grant money and those grant matching opportunities also contribute to their ability to win these prizes.
So the giving days are driven by competition, and we know that. And the prize money helps. It also is kind of a camaraderie of the nonprofits, kind of, you know, working together, but yet trying to raise the funds and trying to win the prizes. And according to the Chronicle of Philanthropy, and when John actually researched this and found it and put it in this presentation the first time I saw it, I was really kind of shocked that San Antonio is the 19th most generous major metropolitan area in the country. And you look at Austin being 32nd, Seattle 40th, Miami 26th. So that's why in the presentation, John wanted to also put those in what they raised in the past few years, those individual markets, because we are and we should succeed and supersede those markets in the coming years. Again, our goal internally is $1 million, but I just know with the amount of buzz that we're getting and excitement from the nonprofit sector about this Giving Day, we should surpass that, and we hope to really kind of mirror Austin on that. So how to get involved, and this is the main thing I think with the board members is what we want you guys to realize is that you're an important piece of this. Whether it be your agency coming to you and asking for some match money or potential prize money, there's also the opportunity for you to get the message out to your contacts. You all work for large businesses, you have clients that you deal with on a day-to-day basis. We need the word to spread through the community like a ripple effect. There's only so much this first year that we're going to be able to do the Big Give as a kind of media splash, but it's also driven by all of the board members of these 256 agencies. You figure, 20 board members, maybe 10 per organization. That's a lot of people, and you all know people, and they know people. So that's kind of the message that I and John want to give you today is this first year, we just need you guys to really get the word out on behalf of your nonprofits and just the entire Big Give SA. And finally, it's going to be a success, and we hope that the nonprofits enjoy the experience. As John said, we'll put a survey out after May 6th to make sure that everyone hopefully got what they want out of it. We're also planning on a follow-up workshop in the middle to end of May after it's all said and done to make sure that we do a donor cultivation workshop with one of our foundation partners to lead that workshop. So what do I do now with the donors that I have from May 6th? Because a lot of these donors, and research has shown, are going to be new to the nonprofit. So we're hoping that we can also show them a way to kind of cultivate those donors and make sure that they don't just come around to April next year and say, oh my God, the Big Give. We need you to give again on that day. We want you to communicate with them and kind of foster their engagement in your nonprofit. So again, I can't stress enough that it is a fundraising day. It's a 24-hour day to give. But really, we are here for the long haul to make sure that the nonprofits succeed in this, and we're going to give them all the tools that we can to make sure that they do, including the Big Give SA website, which all of y'all can access when you go home tonight or at work tomorrow. I encourage you to go on and look at it. Under toolkits, we've given a lot of information and a lot of support to the nonprofits vis-a-vis press releases, templates. These videos of the workshops will be on there. So we want to make sure that they have the tools that they need to make this happen. So we're excited about it. I hope that we've kind of engaged y'all to get excited about it. You've got the email or the web address on there. Please kind of look at the website and check it out, and we appreciate your time. And I would like to now introduce our speaker, and I appreciate him taking the time this evening to talk to y'all a little bit about the board role and engagement. Mr. Palmer Moe, the Managing Director of the Kronkosky Foundation. And a very big supporter of the Big Give, and we thank you.
Thank you.
Change the slides for you?
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great. There'll be easy breaking points. Let me just start out by saying, I'm glad to see you all here. I assume raise your hand if you're board members. Are you here as board members primarily? I got to go shake a hand with somebody I haven't seen in years here. For those of you that are board members of grantees of the Kronkosky Charitable Foundation, we have, I think Scott mentioned that anybody who's received a grant in the last 4 years is eligible. There are some qualifications to that, and we'll be monitoring who's signed up because we do have certain, as you may know if you've applied to us for money, we have specific charitable purposes. And there are some organizations that have received money that are in different areas. And so for those organizations, we have to make a side deal that you use the money. If you win our money, you have to use it in the charitable purposes that we ordinarily would fund. So, but everybody who did receive money in the last 4 years will be eligible one way or the other. I thought I'd go ahead and go down this list, if that's okay with, and our $15,000 is going to be distributed this way as incentives by the Area Foundation, who's coordinating this, but $5,000 will go to the eligible grantee with the most number of contributions. So to get some idea, 5,000 to the organization that has the most in amount of contributions, and then 2,000 to the eligible grantee who had the most contributions in any single hour. And however the Area Foundation determines that calculation will be, that's what will be final. And then 2,000 to the second most in amount of contributions and 1,000 to the second most in number of contributions. So we want to make this, our incentives available to large and small organizations. The smaller ones hopefully will get the number of contributions under the program, and they'll be able to be winners as well. So that's what we're doing to support the Big Give. So I'm here to talk a little bit about the responsibilities of board members, and I think that the success of this whole program is really going to depend on how well the board gets behind the program and really gets involved and with the asks in particular. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about board responsibilities across the board. I typically give this presentation to graduates of the Master's Leadership Program. Or anybody here that's been on the Master's Leadership Program? A few of you have? Okay. So you've heard this before, so don't tell anybody what I'm going to say. Although they've already handed out this outline, which has just about all the key information in it, so I'll probably go a little quicker than usual when I go through it. But what I tell people on the first slide, particularly when you're going to go on a board, and I would say to you as a board, when you're interviewing other board members, potential board members to come on your organization, the first question you ought to ask them is, are you passionate about this issue? Because if you're not passionate about it, you're really not going to be a contributing member of that board. And the fact that you are all here tells me that you're passionate about your organization, so I think that's great. But I do think that's something I tell people, that they really have to be passionate about what goes on. A great example of that I served on the board of Texas Military Institute, seems like years ago now, before I was involved in the foundation. And there was a particular fellow there that was really passionate about what the board members' involvement in the organization. And so he challenged the rest of the board he says, pick whatever area within the organization that you're passionate about and do something special to help TMI in that case. And his passion was libraries and books. And so he decided that he was going to help build the library at TMI. And so what he did is he wrote into personal letters to all his friends, I don't know how many that was, but 100, 200 people, and asked them for a contribution to help support the library. And over 10 years, he probably raised $25,000, $30,000 in books that were added to the TMI library because that was his passion. He contacted and got people involved among his friends. They didn't have to be big donations, but that really helped TMI and really made a big accomplishment. Really, it signified his passion, and he really made it benefit the organization. So that's something we can all do, even as members of a board, is really take that passion one step further in terms of being involved. The second here, know your stuff. Oh, I didn't realize we had a picture back there. I don't need to look down here. Good. Well, again, as a board member, what your organization is asking you to do in connection with Big Give is to ask people for money and in support of the organization. And you're only going to feel comfortable about it if you're passionate about the organization. The other aspect of it, this aspect of it at least, is you really need to understand the organization. You really need to know what it's all about so that you can really talk about it logically and understandably. And so that means you really ought to understand the financial statements of that organization. Now, you might not be accountants, but there's probably an accountant on your board. And so it's important to inquire about, well, what does this mean, or what does that mean? Or, why are the receivables up? Or where'd this debt come from? I didn't know we had any debt. Simple questions are important questions, so be sure you understand the financial side of the operation. be sure you really understand the mission. One of the things that's important about the mission is we often get grant requests from organizations about this great idea they have, and yet it's not exactly within the mission of the organization. It's more in order to get money from the foundation. And so we try to bring people back to the mission and say, you know, this is really important. So it's important as a board to really understand what you're doing and how it relates to the mission. And then with respect to the programs, and I think I'll hit on that again here in a few minutes, but in addition, we require all of our grantees to submit evaluation reports to us after the grant money has been expended. And essentially what we do when we first entertain a proposal, as a part of that proposal, we ask, who are you going to serve? What are you going to do? What are you trying to accomplish with that particular client or patron or whatever the case might be? And how are you going to determine whether or not you were successful at that effort? And so we expect, number one, we get an evaluation plan as a part of our grants. And I'll say also that when we receive a proposal from a grantee or a request for money, a proposal, we ask that the chairman of the board sign that proposal, because we want the board to know what they're asking for. We want the board member, or at least the chairman, to have read the document and see that there's a promise of evaluation, how they're going to evaluate the program. So I think it's important for every board member to understand what are you trying to accomplish, and at the end of each program year, or whatever is the right period, to inquire about how do we do relative, how do we spend our money, are we achieving our objective? The more you know about these details, and they sound like kind of details, the more you know, the better prepared you're going to be to answer questions about the organization, the more comfortable you're going to be when you're asking people to support your organization. And so I think it's really important that you know your stuff. You know, the liability of being on a board is really not all that, the exposure's not really all that great. But I think it's really important. You don't want to be associated with a board an organization that goes bankrupt because of that they haven't managed their money well, or they've lost a grant for some reason that could easily have been avoided if they'd been more careful and more diligent about what they're doing. So those are also very important aspects. So I encourage you to know your stuff. As a part of knowing your stuff, you probably already are, but you ought to be aware that the Form 990 that the organization files with the IRS, the annual tax report, has a number of requirements in it, and I can hardly read this myself, and I don't have them listed in the handout, but I might just hit them. There are some requirements relative to executive compensation, where you need to be sure that, and there's some questions in the Form 990 where executive compensation, how'd you determine it? Did you look at comparative salaries of other executive directors and that sort of thing? And make sure that it's a reasonable determination. Now, 95% or 99% probably of nonprofit organizations aren't out of line on their executive compensation because, frankly, they can't afford to be. So, but some do kind of get into that kind of range. On the other hand, it's good to look at information to get a good feeling that you're being fair with your executive director. And I'll let the Area Foundation, we give a grant each year to the Area Foundation to do a nonprofit salary study that encompasses many of the nonprofit organizations here in our areas. And that report comes out once a year, and you're able to have access as a board to some comparative information that you can use for that process. Some other things that you're supposed to have as a nonprofit that get highlighted in the 990, and I'm just going to hit them real quick. I'm not going to talk about them, but a conflict of interest policy, a whistleblower policy is another one, and you'd have to have a document retention and destruction policy. Those are 3 requirements for nonprofit organizations that came out of the Patriot Act after 9/11. And so those are things every nonprofit is supposed to do. My guess is there are a lot of nonprofits that don't do that, but they are supposed to. A couple other important ones, I think, are investment policy and fundraising policies, or a couple other kind of policies that need to be you all need to be aware of. So the next one is roll up your sleeves, and I think it's a common fact that 20% of the people do 80% of the work. So I say be part of the 20%. I suspect you are since you're here tonight, so, and that's all I have to say about that. Drum up support. One of the reasons you're here tonight is because you're being asked by your organizations to probably coordinate the fundraising effort of Big Give. And I'm here to tell you that it is the #1 responsibility of boards of directors to raise money for their organization. And it's not the executive director's job, it's not the development director's job, it's the board's job. And it's the whole board's job. A lot of organizations, a lot of boards have, well, this is the fundraising or finance committee, they're in charge of fundraising. Everybody needs to really get behind the organization and raise money. And so I think, that is just it's just what you have to do. And an interesting story about that, and this is a master's leadership graduate that went on the board of Avance. And the lady who I happen to know, and I heard this story later, not from her, but I heard this story. I mean, she said, I'll go on the board, but I am not going to ask for money. And this lady was a teacher, and she just not somebody who would typically be out fundraising or working in an organization. Well, about 4 years later, she showed up in my office with the executive director, and they were asking for money. And the reason is that once she got involved in the organization, she thought she was going to really like being involved. But she became superbly passionate with what they were doing, and she wanted to help in every single way she could. And that's why passion is so important to what a board member's involvement in terms of being successful and really being a contributing member. So I think well, I'll hit it in a minute. Now this slide, you can't see this slide either very well, and I'm sorry about that, but usually I do this in a bigger room where the screen is gigantic, you know how master's leadership is, you know. But let me just tell you, this is a report card of the 10 basic board responsibilities, and this is a booklet that's available from Board Source called the 10 Basic Board Responsibilities, just by coincidence. And I highly recommend it to you. There's a lot of really great information in terms of board responsibilities, some of which I'm covering here, but I don't cover all the things that are in there. But nevertheless, this is one I recommend to anybody that might be interested. But interestingly, on this is the report card. And what the nonprofit governance, what the Board Source did is they asked CEOs to anonymously rate their boards. And you can see that in grades here, and you can't see, but I'm going to tell you what it is. The D's and F's, the percentage in fundraising was 45%. The CEOs gave their board 45% of them D's and F's in fundraising. And that's not uncommon. I think that just illustrates how hard it is for people to ask for money, and how, and again, it goes back to how important it is that the people on the board are passionate about what the organization is. And then the next one is community relations. There, 29% got D's and F's, and then recruiting other board members, 30%. And then after that, the D's and F's fall off dramatically. And those are sort of some of what you would be the normal fiduciary responsibility kind of things of boards. So it means you have to really put in terms of the executive director and in terms of the board chair and in terms of you, since you must be the heads of your committees for Big Give, it takes a little more work to get everybody ginned up. Yes?
That information available on a website someplace?
If you type in on Google Nonprofit Governance Index 2012, my guess is it'll show up. And you might go to Board Source too. Board Source has a great website for boards. You may find it that way too. I haven't updated this for 2013. I'm not sure it's out yet. Okay, strike the right chord. This is my be inquisitive responsibility of board members. What I say, the way I put it is, I think you need to really be a supportive board or supportive of the organization, but you need to have an attitude of healthy skepticism. You need to make sure everything makes sense. Don't just assume it makes sense. So when you get reports at the board from the executive director, for the program directors, and things don't sound quite right, or why haven't we? I'll take an example. we have a program called Precious Minds, New Connections, which is a parenting education program that we fund 20 organizations around our 4 counties that provide parenting education. And there are a lot of statistics that come out of that, and one of the statistics is the percentage of meetings that people attend. Well, if that percentage falls below 75%, it raises a big red flag for us. It ought to raise a big red flag for board members as they evaluate their own programs. So that's, and I have it somewhere else here in these notes. I really advocate that executive directors, so as board members, you ought to ask executive directors to put together a dashboard for you that has the key metrics that are important in evaluating that nonprofit organization in terms of finances, in terms of achieving its mission, in terms of program success. You know, if attendance at a program, some percentage of scheduled events is important, an important measure. I mean, they're all different for any kind of program or organization, but a dashboard is a good way to kind of condense it all into one page that you can review at a board meeting and really get a good feeling for. And then it helps trigger, if there's some standards or some norms that develop over a period of time, it'll help trigger questions that might automatically, you wouldn't raise ordinarily, but I think it's really very important. Rely on conversations. There's a book that I think is really pretty good called Governance as Leadership, and it's also a board source publication. And they talk about board responsibilities in 3 ways. They talk about fiduciary responsibility, and that's reviewing financial statements, reviewing approving budgets, looking at budget for actual, making sure that the organization is operating legally within the areas of authority that they have, and all that sort of thing. The whistleblower process, records retention, these things that are required by law. That's the fiduciary level of responsibilities. And most boards do a pretty good job at that. Those are pretty easy to do. The next one is strategic. And strategies very often not for nonprofit organizations and some other types of organizations. They do a strategic plan, great plan, have a board meeting, couple of retreats perhaps, do a document, and it sits on the shelf until 3 years later when the next plan is due. That isn't the way to go about it. Strategies ought to be talked about at every board meeting. That ought to be really where the time is spent, is focusing on what the strategies are, what's changed, what environmental impacts are happening in terms of the economy or government funding or whatever the case might be. Those ought to be looked at in some fashion, I think, every board meeting. And so strategy is something that ought to be on top of minds. You know, a lot of boards spend a lot of time on, here's the audit report, and here's the financial report, and here's the budget, and they talk about all these kind of things, much of which can be handled send them out ahead of the board meeting, and anybody have any questions on the budget? Probably not, and go right on through it. Consent agendas, that's what the word I was trying to think of. Those are really very effective for routine kind of things, and then spend more time on strategy. That's really so that's the second kind of governance as leadership that they address. The last kind, and probably the more fun and more important kind, is what they call the generative governance, and that is a discovery process that happens as a result of conversations among the board. And you know when you have a big issue or you're even talking about strategy, the thing to do is to sit down and talk about it and have a conversation about it and brainstorm, and get everybody involved, and a lot of times the simplest question can be the most important brainstorm that comes out or idea that comes out of a brainstorming session. So those are really important. And one place that I saw it work really well, and as an example, I'm on the board of the Texas San Antonio Medical Foundation, and we did a strategic plan, and in that board we have a voting board, and then we have lifetime members, so we've got about 60 people on the board, and probably about 45 of them show up for every meeting. We had a strategic planning session, which was like a day and a half retreats and that sort of thing, and they take about Well, you only had about 15 or 16 people show up. Am I doing okay on time here? Yeah. Okay. So we made some major decisions at that meeting in terms of recommendations on strategy. And so what we did is when we had the board meeting, we divided everybody up into round tables, and we had one member of the committee sitting at each table. And so what that person did, okay, key strategy number one, they described it, what the pros and cons were in the discussion. They had a discussion around their table. Then we moved on and did that for 5 or 6 key strategies that we wanted to present to the whole board. And then a representative for each table got up and talked about what that table had concluded and why. And then after all those discussions, all those conversations taking place, presentations taking place, we voted on the 5 or 6 strategies. Very effective in terms of getting buy-in from the entire board, making sure the entire board is informed about what the key issues were affecting the organization. And so I thought it was a real learning experience for me. I thought it was a great idea by the guy that put that together for us. But that's what we're talking about, this generative part of governance. And that's where the real guts of good things happen and good ideas come out of and help make an organization a super organization. Okay, the next one, know your place. If you're on the board, you're there as a sounding board, you're not managing the business. And if you find yourself involved in day-to-day discussions as board members, you better take a hard look at the executive director because you don't have the right one. And if you're on the board, you got somebody keeping trying to stick his nose into making the day-to-day decisions, it's up to the board, and particularly the board chair, to step in and say, that's really not our role, and if you can't turn that around, that board member should probably be asked to leave the board. But you're an advisory group. Your main job is hire the executive director and raise money. But you're a sounding board, and you make policy decisions, approve budgets, that kind of thing. Yeah. Okay, share your skills, provide feedback. My suggestion to board members is somebody, 1 or 2 people ought to be a mentor to the executive director. They probably don't have the experience that your board chair has, and I think spending some special time giving them a sounding board where it's okay to say, I got this big problem, I don't know what to do with it, or, there's this person over here that's causing some problems in the office, maybe there's harassment issues, whatever. They need somebody they can talk to, and it happens all the time in business, but it's something that the nonprofits ought to give some really serious thought to. So take your executive director to lunch and give them that opportunity. The other important thing that board members do, and I think it really is applicable at this point in time, and that is to tell the world about your organization. The great thing about having a board is that the board, each of us have our own group of friends. Whether they're 2 or 50 or whatever. But you are at parties with different people than other members of the board, and probably very likely with the staff, the organization. So you have a chance to spread the word about that organization that you're involved in. Well, use that opportunity to do that. Say, somebody asks you, what are you doing these days? Says, well, I really had a great board meeting at Catholic Charities, and we're doing this with the immigrant population, and it's just really heartwarming. I really enjoy it, and I think if you share with people that you normally talk to in the ordinary course, it'll just help spread the word and create awareness of the organization. And then from the standpoint of the organization, I advocate, the firm, the Kronkowski advocates transparency. We expect to see the tax return on the website, the financial statements. I advocate program evaluations. If you watch our websites, we're still okay. If we give a grant to an organization, I said earlier, we require evaluation. We summarize that evaluation. An evaluation that comes to us may be anywhere from 3 pages to, a stack. We summarize it into a page and a half for our trustees because they want to know how their money's being spent. And then we circulate that to the organization, and then we publish it on our website. So anybody we've given money to in the last probably, 5 or 6 years, and every grant there's an evaluation posted on our website if they've given. Until recently, it was if they'd been given $50,000 or more. We bumped that up to $75,000 because it tends to create some people feel like doing evaluation is a hardship. I personally don't, But we don't require them for anybody under $75,000 today. So that's why transparency, I think, is really very important. You may know that we also require that if somebody applies to us, they have to be a member of GuideStar. And the GuideStar, and then if you're a recognized gold member, I think it is a GuideStar, your financials are there, your board, list of your board, a lot of information is there that gives people a chance to evaluate the organization. And so we advocate transparency. Look in the mirror means, as a board, I'd say every 3 years you ought to assess yourselves. See if you're doing a good job. Usually that can be done either by the questionnaire, or you have your chairman or a chairman in corporate world, we do a lead director. But you can interview the board members and get their, how do you think about everybody else? And if you need to move people off the board, it gives you an opportunity to do it. And then you also ought to do an annual evaluation of the CEOs. Those kind of go hand in hand. And then this is another report card, the last one again that you can't read very well, but I listed on this one, let's see, do I have a source? I don't have a source on this one, but I listed only the 6 bottom things here in terms of, this is kind of interesting. They asked the executive director, how's the board doing on this? And they asked the board, how you doing on this? And in every case, the board thought he was doing a hell of a lot better than the CEO thought they were doing. But in fundraising, the board gave themselves a 2.25, which would be a little bit better than a C. But the CEO gave them a 1.29, was a little better than a D. Again, I think that those kind of conversations should probably be taking place. But it just all that tells me is that we need to do as board members, we need to do a better job at some of the areas that are really critically important to the nonprofit organization where you have expertise that they don't. So with that, I'll stop and answer any questions anybody has. Sorry for going through that so fast, but had a time constraint here. Any questions? Scott? Oh, we got one, Linda?
When you talk to the boards about fundraising, do you give them that selling advance, excuse the expression? Do you have friends at church, a Sunday school class, whatever? If you have friends at work, no matter where you work, if you have friends in the neighborhood, if you have friends you go to parties to, are you out there talking about your organization to them? And the big give, it's only a $10 donation. So have you got them signed up to help you win that most donors in Allen? Because you've told everybody you know, and you've asked them to tell everybody they know, and oh, your relatives too, be sure you get them. You kind of do that one on them?
Yeah, I second that. The beauty of Big Give is it gives you a great opportunity. It gets the nonprofit organizations a great opportunity to get them exposed to a lot more people at $10 a head, and so it is a great opportunity for expand the base of people and increase awareness. And in the process, the training that the nonprofits are getting on using social networking ideas and concepts will be real beneficial, I think, going forward. Yeah, so I think it's a great effort, and I hope, I'm sure it's going to work. I just hope it's as successful as you're all hoping. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So I appreciate y'all taking the time out of your evening to come to this meeting about the Big Give, and thank you to Paul Mermot from Kronkosky, not only for being here and speaking to y'all, but also being a huge supporter of the Big Give SA. Are there any questions regarding the event, the Big Give SA, and yes, ma'am.
Can you walk me through what the donor experience is going to be like on the webpage?
Yeah.
Are they going to have to find?
I can show you.
Yeah. So if you want to show it.
Sure, yeah.
And the question was, and because we're taping this and we don't have a mic in the audience, is walk us through what the donor will go through the day of the Big Give. One of the unique things about this is, again, as Linda said, minimum donation is $10, maximum is whatever the donor wants it to be. And you can also make multiple donations to multiple organizations with one transaction. So you're not doing a transaction click and whatnot.
So on the day of the event, this is the home page to the website. And on the day of the event, this changes. So right now, it's just filled with a lot of text to describe sort of what the event is, how people can get involved. But on the day of, you'll see a multi-give section here, so that you can just type in a number of organizations that you want to sponsor, and then you can do all of it in one credit card transaction, and it's just done like that. Like, it's really quick. Or there are several options for donating. The other option is going to be that you see this leaderboard here, and right now it's just set to where if you scroll down, there are just all the agencies that are currently involved are on that list. But on the day of the event, what's going to happen is that this board is dynamic. And so as organizations raise money and as organizations have new unique donors, they'll move up and down that list. So you'll be able to see exactly where your organization is at any one point, which also gives you the opportunity to sort of pivot the conversation and immediately say, if you were trying to target, say, 6 a.m. in the morning for your organization to win the prize instead, you can say, hey, look, we are now sitting in second place for this hour. Like, let's make a final push. Like, let's really get out there and do this. And so that's one opportunity. And when you click on these organizations, you'll see it'll immediately take you to a donation page. And what that donation page is going to show, and this will also change day of the event, because they can edit them up to that point. It's going to show you their address, their logo, a link to all their social media sites, Facebook, Twitter, a link to their Guide Star in case you're a new donor and want to do research. You can go check out what they're up to. Their mission, and then over here where you see the donations will begin being accepted on, that's going to have a spot. So you can just type in the information right there, transaction done. And then that'll immediately update that board, the leaderboard, so that you can see how much money is raised in total and how much money each organization has raised. And the sidebar on that leader page here, if you go back to it, right now it's filled with Facebook and Twitter updates, but what that's going to change to is whatever the hourly prizes are. So it'll show you what's happening this hour, what's happened in the past, who's won what awards in the past, so you can really sort of spread that word to your friends and family.
Will you distribute the information on prizes to the nonprofits beforehand so that they can sort of coordinate on a particular prize? We're going to go for this. This could be our goal.
Yes, our goal is to have all of that out and up on the website and announced to the nonprofits by the first week of April. That'll give them a month to know what the prizes are. We're still raising funds for the prizes, so we don't want to put anything up until we're sure we've kind of captured it all.
What if somebody is just browsing? They don't even know who they want to give to, but they just decided they're going to give today? Like, is there going to be any way that they can sort by like children's charities? Or
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
It does group search sort, and then in addition to that, all the nonprofits receive an embeddable link. So the vast majority of people, what we found through other communities, the vast majority of people who give on the day of these events find it because friends and friends of family have shared links, and that embedded link that these nonprofits will receive will be a direct link back to their page. So there are people who donate by just going and saying, hey, I'm gonna pick somebody. But the vast majority of them end up giving in the other way, where they've sort of been told, hey, we're really targeting this hour, like help out our organization. We're not going after total money, we're going after the number of people. We really want to increase that number. And we've seen sort of nationwide that about 30 to 45% of givers on the day of these events are first-time givers to an organization. And with that, there's about a 90 to 95% retention rate for the following year. So if you give to organization, if your friend gives to organization A, or to say your organization, they give to your organization year 1. In year 2, if that foundation has done a good job of being a good steward of that connection and staying in touch with them, there is a very high likelihood that they will give to that organization again in year 2, and then in addition to that, organization B as well. So that's how these things sort of grow exponentially.
Perhaps will be good to get the link so that we could create a QR code or something like that.
Absolutely. The link, the nonprofits have the link now.
Okay.
So you can talk to your agency about distributing that to you.
Okay.
On the hour, say there's a challenge at 3 o'clock in the morning. Is there a way of knowing how many other agencies are signed up for that challenge so that you know who your competition is? And
Not without, I mean, unless you've done some like sort of sleuthing in advance. Or you happen to get up at 2 a.m. and you've seen live tweeting about people that are going up at 3 a.m. slide. Your best bet's to sort of just track that leaderboard at that point. And a number of agencies, and this was an interesting point that came up in the last meeting, the meeting we had on Monday, but a number of agencies have done a sort of response to this. And what they're doing is they're sending out cards to people beforehand, like pledge cards that say, I'm going to give on the day of the big give. Like, here's my information. Run my card at 2 a.m. so that you don't have to be up in the morning to do it. So they have somebody running all that information on the back end for you. But what we found is that people get really addicted to checking out the board and making sure their organization is doing well. So they're up. I mean, it really becomes a whole day affair. Like, you're checking it throughout the day.
Can we run the video before we close?
Yeah, absolutely.
Before we close, we just want to run, and we should have done this at the beginning, but, you know, at least we didn't forget. We want to run the video that we had produced for the big give, and
Well, I don't know that the audio is plugged in, but it's okay.
Oh, is it not?
We'll be able to hear from here. We'll see how loud my computer is. Yeah, it's
no,
not
that's
loud.
okay. Okay, I thought we had audio, but that's cool. Well,
No,
check it out on the website. It's a great minute 45-second video. We've cut this down, and we're going to recut another 30 for TV, and then potentially the Silver and Black Give Back. The foundation at the Spurs potentially might run it during some of the games leading up to the big give, because they are a participating nonprofit as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is on YouTube, so if you just go to YouTube and type in the Big Give SA, you'll be able to pull it up and send that link over to people, or just direct them to the homepage.
How about the chambers? Are they participating, or those of us that have memberships in the chambers too, are they a way to get the word out, or?
We are actually approaching our PR firm. We had a PR meeting a couple of weeks ago, and they're going to be reaching out to all the chambers across the city to, number one, get the word out, and then potentially also spread the word for potential organizations, corporate sponsors. But we definitely are reaching out to them as well. Any other questions? Well, thank you all very much. I appreciate you taking the time, and please have a good evening. I thought there was audio.
Yeah, I told them not to put it on here because